The night began with a feeling neither of them spoke about. It followed Emma as she walked beside Daniel down the quiet street, the city lights of Portland stretching behind them like a soft glow that refused to fade. Cars passed now and then, but the sidewalk felt empty, as if the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. Daniel walked with his hands in his jacket pockets, relaxed but thoughtful. Emma noticed small things about him tonight, the way he slowed his steps to match hers, the way he glanced over as if checking that she was still there. She liked that about him. It made her feel chosen. They had met earlier for dinner, nothing fancy, just a small place near the river. The conversation had been easy, almost too easy. Laughing came naturally. Silence did not feel awkward. And when Daniel asked, almost casually, if she wanted to come by his place for a bit, she said yes before she could overthink it. Now they stood in front of his apartment building. It was older, brick walls worn by time, but clean and welcoming. The front door buzzed open, and Daniel held it for her. "Thanks," Emma said, her voice calm even though her chest felt tight. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of soap and warm air. Their footsteps echoed as they walked to the stairs. Emma wondered why she felt nervous. She had been to friends' places before. This should have been normal. But this felt different. This felt personal. When they reached his door, Daniel hesitated for half a second before unlocking it. Emma noticed. That pause stayed with her. The door opened into a quiet apartment. Soft yellow light filled the space, coming from a lamp near the couch. A window looked out over the street, curtains half open. Everything felt lived in but neat. Books on a shelf. A jacket folded on a chair. A guitar leaning against the wall. "Make yourself comfortable," Daniel said, setting his keys down. Emma stepped inside slowly, as if crossing an invisible line. She took off her coat and placed it carefully over the back of a chair. The room felt warm, safe. It felt like him. Daniel walked into the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of water. When he came back, he handed one to her. Their fingers brushed for a moment. It was brief, but Emma felt it all the same. They sat on opposite ends of the couch at first. Not because they wanted distance, but because neither of them knew how close was allowed. The space between them held questions. Daniel spoke first. He talked about his day at work, about a project that had gone better than expected. Emma listened, nodding, smiling. She liked hearing about his world. It made him real in a deeper way. She shared stories too, about her job, about moving to the city a year ago, about how she still felt like she was learning where she belonged. Daniel listened closely, not interrupting, not rushing her. That mattered to her. As they talked, the space between them seemed to shrink. Not physically, but emotionally. Their voices softened. Laughter came easily. Eye contact lasted longer than usual. Emma felt a quiet hope building inside her. She had not planned for this night to mean anything more than a visit. But now, sitting in his place, hearing his voice fill the room, she felt something shift. She wondered if Daniel felt it too. He leaned back against the couch and sighed softly, not tired, just thoughtful. His eyes rested on her face, serious now. "There's something I've been wanting to say," he began. Emma's breath caught. This was it, she thought. The moment she hadn't dared to expect but secretly wanted. Her heart beat faster, loud in her ears. Before he could continue, a sound broke the quiet. Laughter echoed from the hallway outside. Footsteps. Multiple voices, getting closer. Daniel frowned slightly. Emma felt her stomach drop, though she didn't know why yet. A knock came at the door. Not gentle. Familiar. Confident. Daniel stood up, surprised. "That's weird," he said under his breath. He walked to the door and opened it. 3 of his friends stood there, smiling, talking over each other, clearly in the middle of a joke. They carried bags of food and wore the casual comfort of people who felt welcome without asking. "Man, you won't believe," one of them started, then stopped when he saw Emma. The room fell into an awkward pause. Daniel turned back toward Emma, eyes wide with apology. "I didn't know they were coming," he said quickly. Emma stood up, forcing a polite smile. She nodded, though her chest felt heavy. The quiet moment she had been holding on to shattered without warning. The apartment, once calm and intimate, now felt crowded and loud. And Emma realized that whatever this night was supposed to be, it had just changed, without either of them choosing it. The apartment hummed with voices, clinking bottles, and laughter. Emma stayed on the couch, a small smile fixed to her face, while Daniel tried to introduce her to his friends. She nodded at names she had only heard in passing, and they smiled back, friendly but unaware of the weight pressing between her and Daniel. She felt like a shadow, present but invisible, watching him from across the room. Daniel laughed at one of his friend's jokes, and Emma's chest tightened. The sound was familiar, comforting, but right now, it was out of reach, as if she were behind glass. She wanted to speak, to say something that would bring the room back down to the soft intimacy they had just shared. But the words stuck in her throat. She looked around the apartment, noticing details she hadn't before. A photo of Daniel with a dog on the bookshelf. A stack of books by the window. The way the soft light from the lamp fell across the couch cushions. It was still his world, warm and lived in, but crowded now with noise that didn't belong. Daniel finally sat down beside her again, trying to steer the conversation back to her, asking about her day, her week. His friends lingered in the background, talking over each other, occasionally glancing their way. He leaned in slightly, just enough to include her without being obvious. Emma felt a flicker of hope, but it was fragile, almost painful in its delicacy. She spoke softly about work, about the little victories and frustrations that made her week long but meaningful. Daniel listened intently, nodding, asking questions that showed he remembered details she had mentioned weeks ago. That connection, the way he remembered, the way he really cared, made her stomach twist with longing. She realized she didn't just like him. She wanted him to notice her in a way beyond friendship, in a way he didn't know yet. But the laughter of his friends rose again, cutting through the quiet she had been building with him. One of them dropped a bag of chips, and it sounded loud in the otherwise warm room. Daniel jumped up to help, leaving her alone for a moment. She felt a pang of disappointment. It wasn't his fault, of course. They were friends. She was the guest. But that moment she had imagined, the quiet, the closeness, slipped further away. Emma shifted on the couch, unsure if she should leave the room or stay. She wanted to stay, wanted to see him, but the energy made her feel like she was intruding on something she didn't belong to. She watched him, moving between the kitchen and the living room, laughing, smiling. He was alive and happy in his element, and she wanted to be part of it. But she also wanted something else, something private, something just for them. Her mind drifted back to earlier, to the first moment she had stepped into his apartment, to the quiet and soft light, the way he had looked at her like she was important. That feeling had been hers alone, a small treasure she could keep safe. And now it was mixed with the voices of others, shared with people who didn't understand. She clenched her hands in her lap, trying to hold on to that moment, to keep the warmth alive despite the chaos. Daniel noticed her quiet and reached over, lightly touching her arm. The gesture was small, almost invisible to his friends, but for Emma it was everything. It was a reminder that he still saw her, still cared, even if the room was loud. She smiled, this time genuine, and leaned slightly toward him, feeling a little of the closeness return. They talked in whispers now, over the noise, sharing little things about themselves. Emma told him about a painting she had seen at a gallery that had made her cry. Daniel spoke about a song that reminded him of someone he had lost, and she listened with her heart open. The room around them buzzed, but for these few minutes, they had carved a small space where only they existed. Even then, the sound of laughter and chatter reminded her how fragile it was. One of his friends called out a joke, loud and brash, and the tiny bubble of intimacy burst, leaving her feeling exposed again. She wanted to tell him how she felt, how much she cared, but the timing was gone. She wanted to tell him everything, but she had to wait for the right moment, for a night without interruptions, without chaos. Daniel seemed to sense her retreat. He turned toward her, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. His eyes searched hers, and Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. She knew he wanted to say something. She could feel it. The air between them thickened with words unsaid, with emotions hovering, almost spilling over. She thought about leaving, stepping out into the cool night, giving herself space to breathe. But she didn't. She stayed. She stayed because even in the chaos, in the presence of his friends, she felt the pull of him, of the possibility that he felt it too. They exchanged glances that spoke more than words ever could. A fleeting smile, a soft tilt of the head, a quiet laugh shared just between them. Those small gestures were louder than the room around them, louder than the voices and the noise. In that moment, Emma realized that sometimes intimacy didn't need silence. Sometimes it survived in the spaces between, in stolen moments, in touches unnoticed by anyone else. Still, the awareness of the interruption lingered. The night had started with a promise of something private, something fragile. Now it was different. Emma felt the weight of what could have been, the soft ache of longing she couldn't voice. She wanted to reach for him, to tell him how deeply she felt, but the energy in the room kept her silent. Daniel leaned back, finally, and glanced at her again. His eyes held apology, hope, and something more, something she wanted to understand. But before either of them could speak, one of his friends called his name from the kitchen. Daniel's attention flickered, and Emma looked down, pretending to check her phone. She could feel the night slipping away from her, the intimate moment she had waited for fading under the laughter and chatter. Yet she also felt something else, a spark, quiet and persistent, that told her it wasn't over. That connection, fragile but real, had not disappeared. It was just waiting, like a seed in soil, for the right time to grow. Emma realized that love, or attraction, or whatever this feeling was, didn't always come in perfect timing. Sometimes it arrived messy, tangled in noise and interruptions, in moments that weren't fully yours. But that didn't make it any less powerful. She breathed slowly, letting the warmth of his presence settle into her chest, keeping her grounded even as the room demanded her attention. The evening stretched on, and Emma stayed. She smiled when he caught her gaze, small and private, and felt her heart respond. She knew this night mattered, even if it didn't feel perfect. Sometimes the most important moments were hidden between the noise, in glances, in touches, in the quiet understanding that two people could see each other, even when the world crowded in. As the night moved forward, Emma realized something essential. It wasn't about the perfect moment, the private room, or the quiet apartment. It was about the connection they shared, the pull between them that refused to disappear even in chaos. That pull was real, and it mattered. And for the first time that evening, despite the interruptions, she let herself feel hope. The hope that he might feel the same. The hope that tonight wasn't over. The hope that, somehow, even with his friends there, they were still theirs. The laughter grew louder. The jokes, the stories, the clattering of snacks on the coffee table, it all came crashing over Emma like a wave she hadn't expected. Daniel tried to stay in the middle, moving between his friends and her, but she could see the shift in his energy. The calm, intimate night they had started vanished, replaced by a room full of noise and movement she had no place in. She stayed on the couch, hands folded in her lap, forcing herself to smile politely at introductions she barely caught. Each time one of his friends made eye contact with her, she returned it, but it felt hollow. She felt like a character in someone else's story, present but irrelevant. Daniel kept checking on her. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly when he returned with a plate of snacks. His voice was soft, almost drowned out by the chatter. She nodded, but inside, her heart sank. The warmth they had shared earlier, the soft, private closeness, had evaporated. One of his friends, Max, plopped down on the couch beside her, unknowingly pressing into her tiny bubble of space. "So what's new with you, Emma?" he asked, friendly, curious. She smiled politely, answering in short sentences, but it wasn't the conversation she had imagined. She wanted Daniel's eyes on her, his full attention, not someone else asking questions. Daniel, trying to manage the chaos, laughed along with them, his attention pulled away. Emma felt invisible again. It wasn't his fault, she reminded herself. But the feeling was real, sharp in her chest. She had pictured tonight differently, soft, calm, close. And now, it was crowded and loud, and her feelings for him felt like they had nowhere to go. She tried to catch his eye. Just a glance. A small, silent connection. When she did, he smiled quickly, a little guilty, and returned to talking with his friends. That tiny smile was comforting, but it wasn't enough. She wanted more. She wanted him for herself, even if just for a few minutes. The room shifted again when someone turned on music. The laughter and voices blended with the low beat, and the apartment felt smaller, louder, almost suffocating. Emma moved slightly, adjusting her position on the couch, trying to shrink herself into a corner where she could watch without being pulled into the chaos. She remembered the moments before his friends arrived, the soft lighting, the quiet, the way Daniel had looked at her as if the world outside didn't exist. Those moments felt distant now, like a memory from another life. She missed them, and it made her chest ache. She had wanted to tell him how she felt, to finally put words to the longing she had kept in her heart. But now, with the room full of voices, she didn't know if she could. Daniel noticed her silence and moved closer, leaning toward her. "I'm sorry," he said under his breath. "I didn't know they'd come over like this." His hand brushed against hers as he adjusted the plate of snacks, and the touch sent a small jolt through her. She wanted to lean into it, to close the space between them, but the energy in the room made it impossible. One of his friends, Liam, began teasing Daniel about a story from work. The story was loud, dramatic, and exaggerated, and Daniel laughed along, trying to keep the energy light. Emma watched, feeling a mixture of admiration and frustration. She loved seeing him happy, but she also wanted him to notice her, really notice her, beyond polite smiles. Emma realized something then: she wasn't just missing him in this moment. She was missing the possibility of them, what they could be if the world allowed it. She longed for the quiet, for the intimacy they had almost shared, for the closeness that had been so real just minutes ago. She shifted her gaze to the window, looking out at the dark city beyond. The lights twinkled, calm and distant, a stark contrast to the crowded, loud apartment. She wanted to escape, to breathe, to let the night belong to just them. But she didn't move. She stayed because leaving felt like admitting defeat. She stayed because even amidst the chaos, Daniel was still there, and that mattered. Daniel finally noticed her looking away and followed her gaze. Their eyes met across the couch, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. He offered a small, reassuring smile, but even that was interrupted when one of his friends dropped a drink, sending it splashing onto the carpet. Daniel jumped up, apologizing and grabbing a towel, leaving Emma alone for a moment longer. The pause gave her space to think. She realized she couldn't force this moment, couldn't demand his attention. All she could do was wait, watch, and hope that he saw her even in the noise. She clenched her hands in her lap, feeling both frustration and affection, longing and understanding. When Daniel returned, he sat beside her again, closer than before, careful not to invade her space too much. They spoke quietly, sharing small observations, comments, inside jokes that no one else could hear. Even in the midst of his friends, they found a thread of connection, a line of intimacy that survived despite the chaos. Emma smiled, letting herself feel the warmth return. It wasn't the quiet she had imagined, but it was something. She realized intimacy wasn't always about silence. Sometimes it was about finding the person in the middle of everything else, noticing the small moments, the glances, the shared smiles. Still, the interruption lingered, like a shadow. The night had started as something private, something special, and now it felt fractured, messy. She wanted to lean into him, to tell him how she felt, but the timing wasn't right. The room was still alive with chatter, jokes, and clattering dishes. The opportunity hovered, just out of reach. Daniel seemed to feel the tension too. He kept his hand close to hers, brushing against her fingers occasionally, a quiet reassurance. He leaned in, speaking softly so only she could hear. Their words were small, unspoken promises wrapped in sound. Emma felt her heart respond, quickening, longing. The night pressed on. His friends were oblivious to the undercurrent between them, to the feelings simmering beneath polite smiles and shared snacks. Emma felt both invisible and central, watching Daniel navigate the room while knowing that their connection was theirs alone, delicate but real. She realized something important: the night wasn't lost. It wasn't ruined. Chaos didn't erase connection. Even if his friends dominated the apartment, even if laughter and noise filled the air, their quiet moments, glances, touches, smiles, were real. They were evidence of something deeper, something that could survive interruptions, survive mistimed nights. Emma shifted slightly, leaning back against the couch, letting herself breathe. She let the warmth of Daniel's presence fill her chest again, even amidst the noise. She understood that love, or attraction, or the feeling she couldn't name, didn't need perfect conditions. It could exist in fragments, in pieces, in stolen moments. And as she looked at him, laughing at a joke she didn't hear, their eyes met again. That small spark between them reminded her that the night, even messy and loud, still held possibility. She wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. But the pull between them was undeniable, electric, impossible to ignore. And she knew that whatever happened next, whatever the noise, the interruptions, the laughter, this was theirs. Even in chaos, connection found a way. Even in crowded rooms, hearts could still speak. Even in the middle of everything shifting, something between them was unbroken. The apartment was alive with noise, but for Emma, everything felt slowed down. She sat on the edge of the couch, watching Daniel move between his friends, laughing, pouring drinks, sharing stories. He looked effortless, happy in his element, but every time he glanced her way, she felt the weight of the night pressing in. They had started the evening with a quiet promise, an unspoken closeness that now seemed fragile and distant. Emma thought about leaving, stepping out into the cold night air. Part of her longed for that escape, the space to breathe, to think, to let her heart catch up to the emotions she couldn't voice. But another part of her stayed rooted, not ready to give up, not ready to let the night slip away entirely. She wanted to see him, wanted to hold on to that spark, even if only in fragments. Daniel noticed her watching. He paused mid-laugh, just for a second, and their eyes met. That tiny moment made her chest tighten. He knew she was there, and that recognition, however brief, warmed her like sunlight through clouds. He moved closer, trying to create a small island for them amidst the chaos. His hand brushed hers, and she felt a jolt of electricity that neither laughter nor chatter could erase. One of his friends tripped over a chair leg, knocking a small bowl of chips to the floor. Daniel jumped up, apologizing loudly, grabbing a towel to clean the mess. Emma smiled faintly, watching him. He was kind, attentive, responsible, and even in the distraction, she felt drawn to him more than ever. She wanted to reach out, to tell him what she was feeling, but the timing was impossible. His friends were everywhere, their voices too loud, their energy too consuming. Emma thought about all the moments she had imagined with him, quiet evenings, long conversations, laughter that was just theirs. Tonight had promised that intimacy, and now it felt stolen, replaced by friendly chaos she couldn't compete with. She realized that love, or whatever this pull between them was, sometimes didn't arrive in perfect timing. Sometimes it arrived messy, tangled in noise and interruptions, in moments she had to fight to keep alive. Daniel finally returned to sit beside her. He was careful not to crowd her, but close enough that she could feel his presence. They spoke quietly, small words that no one else could hear, shared observations, tiny jokes, glances loaded with meaning. Even amidst the laughter and chatter, they created a private world between them. Those stolen moments felt precious, delicate, and full of promise. Emma leaned slightly toward him, letting the warmth of his shoulder brush against hers. It was subtle, almost accidental, but it spoke volumes. She wanted more than a brush of skin, more than fleeting words. She wanted to tell him how she felt, to reach for the intimacy that had seemed possible before his friends arrived. But she held back, afraid that saying the words might shatter the fragile connection they still had. Time moved differently. The evening stretched into hours, and yet nothing felt wasted. Each glance, each small touch, each shared smile was charged with unspoken emotion. Emma realized that intimacy didn't always need grand gestures. Sometimes it existed in fragments, in the moments that no one else noticed, in the quiet understanding between two people amidst a noisy world. She looked at him, and he looked back, and in that silent exchange, everything she hadn't said hung between them. She wanted to tell him about the way her heart ached when he laughed with someone else, about the longing she had held in her chest since the moment they had met. But she didn't. Not yet. Tonight wasn't perfect. Tonight was complicated. And yet, the pull between them was undeniable. Eventually, Emma stood, smoothing her coat over her shoulders. Daniel noticed immediately. "Are you leaving?" His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, full of concern. She nodded, unsure how to explain the mix of disappointment, longing, and hope swirling inside her. I think I need some air, she said softly, forcing a smile. His eyes searched hers, reading more than her words said, and she felt a flicker of connection that made her stomach tighten. He followed her to the door. The room behind them was still alive with laughter and chatter, but stepping into the hallway felt like stepping into a different world. The air was cool and honest, and Emma drew a slow breath, trying to steady the rush of emotions inside her. Daniel stood close, quiet, watching her. Neither spoke for a moment, and in that silence, the weight of the night settled between them. Emma wanted to say something, anything, that would bridge the distance, that would make him understand everything she couldn't put into words. But she stayed silent, letting the moment linger. Sometimes, she realized, silence could speak louder than any confession. Daniel reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered for just a moment, and the electricity between them flared again. She closed her eyes briefly, savoring it, holding on to the warmth of him against the cool night. I'll text you, he said finally, his voice low, almost hesitant. She nodded, knowing that this night wasn't over, not really. There were messages left unsent, conversations left unspoken, moments they had to pause but not end. Emma stepped out into the night. The city lights stretched before her, calm and steady, a stark contrast to the crowded apartment she had just left. She walked slowly, feeling the ache of longing mix with the hope of possibility. The night had shifted, changed in ways she hadn't expected, but the connection with Daniel was still there, real and unbroken, waiting for the right time to grow. Back inside, Daniel leaned against the door long after she had left. The laughter and chatter of his friends felt distant now. He realized that the night had taken something from him too, the quiet moments, the closeness that had been just theirs. He closed his eyes for a second, imagining her smile, the warmth of her presence, the subtle brush of her hand. Later, his phone buzzed. A message from Emma appeared on the screen. He stared at it, hesitant, unsure if he should read it immediately. There was something unspoken in that message, something they both understood without words. Emma didn't read any messages she had received either. She walked slowly, letting the cool night air fill her lungs, replaying the evening in her mind. Nothing had gone wrong, and yet everything had changed. Some moments didn't need drama or conflict to leave an impression. Sometimes, heartbreak came from silence, from timing, from words left unsaid. The night had ended quietly, softly, but its echoes lingered. Emma and Daniel both knew that the story wasn't over. It was paused, suspended between longing and courage, between what had been shared and what still waited to be said. And sometimes, they realized, love, or the possibility of it, thrived in pauses, in interruptions, in nights that didn't go as planned but still left hearts full. Emma stopped at a street corner, looking up at the sky. Stars twinkled faintly, distant but steady. She smiled softly, letting herself feel hope. She didn't know when the next moment with Daniel would come, or if it would be perfect. But she knew one thing, the night had mattered, and so had they. Back inside, Daniel pressed his hand to the door where she had stood, closing his eyes. He felt the echo of her presence, the quiet pull between them that had survived noise, interruptions, and chaos. He knew he wanted more, even if he didn't know how to reach it yet. And so, the night ended not with words, not with action, but with understanding, a promise that what was left unsaid was still alive, still waiting, still theirs. Some moments don't end. They wait. They linger. And they change everything without a single word.